Ooh, this is exotic. Muscle Cat Media. Nice. Cultural.
Well, it's Weekend Pickoff time on a Friday here in Australia, and I am limping into the weekend to say, the very least, I suppose my Destiny draft team is going all right. That's probably the only thing that's keeping my head above water, to be honest. The Cardinals have had a terrible start to the second half following the All-Star break. And my beloved West Tigers, Spoon, they just cannot stay out of the media for all the wrong reasons. Adam Dewey reportedly walking out on the club yesterday and refusing to play because he didn't want to change positions. I still contend that there's probably more to this story, and I'm not going to pile on Adam Dewey like I feel like everybody else is doing. Spoon, first of all, hello to you. But do you recall ever seeing anything like this? I mean, we can tie it back to baseball here at some point, but aside from like holdouts in the NFL, which are usually contract related, I don't remember ever seeing a story like this where a player who is, at the main position, I mean, essentially the quarterback of a team, Adam Dewey, the number 7 for the West Tigers, being asked to change positions for one game to make way for a rookie to debut and just ruling himself out, deciding he doesn't want to play.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously the NFL comparison works. I think it's surprising to see it in rugby league because there's not enough money to kind of feed the egos that this kind of thing normally needs, right? Like, I think you could probably draw parallels to European soccer, where I think this kind of thing happens all the time. Like, a manager decides he wants to play 2 at the front, and every striker thinks they should be the only striker taking 20 shots a game, but they're on £1 million a week, so it's a little bit of a different story there. Dewey's on peanuts, isn't he? Isn't he on like one of the more team-friendly deals in the league?
Oh, he was, but he extended last year, so the contract now is probably $500K a year. He was on peanuts prior because he had all those ACL injuries that the team had continued to back him through. Like he did, there were years where you'd only get 1 or 2 games out of him, and they just continued to give him a contract. And he's paid the team back for that, right? Because he's been great. Not that the Tigers have achieved anything, but yeah, I mean, they rewarded him last year with a 3-year extension. This is the first year of that 3-year extension. So that kind of makes it all that little bit stranger.
Yeah, I mean, if you pro rata his current deal on the games he's played this year, they're not even, some of them are repeat injuries, but he also just has a knack for getting hurt, right? Which is sort of to your point about what we spoke earlier about. You do increase injury risk when you ask guys to play outside their natural role. I think it's pretty unique. I can't remember seeing it unless it's purely based on contracts, no guaranteed money in the NFL or players requesting a trade and kind of sitting out until they get their trade. It's strange for a guy who's put pen to paper to be there for the next 5 years saying, like, call me when you need me.
The closest I can get to in baseball is maybe the Rafi Devers situation last year when he was in Boston, potentially.
Yeah. I mean, they asked him to play first base and he said, I don't want to play first base, but then they traded him away and he became a first baseman anyway. That whole thing was kind of strange. And again, it reeks of there being more to it, which is sort of what you alluded to here.
Yeah, it just, it's very strange. And I just can't catch a break sporting wise. I think the exact words I used to you this morning were, I effing hate sports. But here we are doing a sports podcast. I mean, this is more of a therapy session than it is anything else. You hear about like sports psychologists for the players. We need to create some sort of sports psychologist program for fans, like a fan sports psychology. I mean, I guess maybe that's what podcasts are, right? That's what we're doing. But you hear about these sports psychologists and psychiatrists all the time for the players that are trying to get right. What about those poor fans that tend to just struggle, particularly me, the one that, cheering for ones that particularly aren't great and haven't been for years?
Yeah, positive visualization definitely doesn't seem to work. So we'd need to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Look, there has been one positive for me this week, and that has been Destiny Draft. My team's ticking along relatively well. We spoke on Wednesday after a couple days of action, and Team Rolsey is still ticking right along quite nicely, as is Team Eric. We're actually on 14 points apiece. Miguel Vargas has been great. I mean, just as we thought that he might be. He's gotten 5 points from Vargas. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has finally gotten into the positive. He's sitting on 1 point, and Chase Burns who had a really similar start to what Mizorowski had. I mean, almost identical. He went 5 innings instead of 4, and he'll get 2 more starts, I would think. He's sitting on 8 points. Michael Harris Jr. had a good day for me today, 2 for 4. He homered. He's sitting on 8 points. Cole Young has been the weird one. I was oddly thinking that he would just be the type of guy that would help me tick along, but he's 0 for this week, and he struck out a pair of times, so he's sitting on -2. And Mizorowski has spoken about on 8 points. Spoon, you and JT are just kind of in your own race, albeit Brian Wu has not yet started. I believe he'll get a start this weekend. But Juan Soto has probably been the main one to let you down. We talked about that on Wednesday, and he hasn't done a whole lot to get back in your good books in the last couple of days. Granted, he has only played once since then.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm kind of quietly confident. I don't think I'm going to win this round. I think you or Eric will put up a big score based on what happens with your other
Every
two
time
starts.
you say that, I finish last.
But to be honest, my big hurdle to clear was Corbin Carroll, firstly, not going to the IL, which he came back after just one off day. And then secondly, breaking out of what had been the worst slump since his rookie season. The fact that he's on 6 points, I mean, you would have watched the game today. He had a chance to put up a stack today. I reckon he was up there with 2 or 3 on 3 or 4 times. And even when the game was out of reach, unlike yesterday when the game was out of reach against the A's, Torrey left him in the lineup. He got another AB with the bases loaded, but didn't quite pull through. But look, 6 points from Corbin is well ahead of where I thought I was when I said I like to gamble and I want to do something dumb before selecting him in the 3rd round on Monday. Soto, yeah, poor so far, but tiny sample size. And, 2 of those 3 strikeouts were against Mizorowski, much to your delight. I think he's going to be okay. I'm not too worried about him. I think he's probably one of the more consistent guys you could have in this format. Brian Wu will be the make or break for me. What scares me is that his start on Sundays on the road, his splits, man, like if you look at his home versus away numbers this year, he's a completely different player. And I'm only going to get the 2 starts from him. So kind of like where JT is, but JT's even worse because I think, did you say JT Jin's gone to the, too many JTs in this sentence. But
yeah, he's on
JT
the 15-day IL, so he's essentially a wipe for JT.
Yeah, I think JT's probably got 4th on locked, barring, something miraculous from Mike Trout or a couple of really good Paul Skeens starts. But if you look at, a donut from Jin and 1 from Trout so far, Skeens a couple of good starts. I mean, we know that you need 40 plus to win. I think it's a massive stretch for JT to get to 40. I think 40-ish is in range for me if I can kind of get like 2 7s from Brian Wu. It put me around the 15 mark. Corbin's already got 6 with a week and a weekend to go. He could put, add another 10 or so, and then Soto would need to get a hold of a couple. I think my ceiling is around 40. What scares me, obviously, is you 2 guys on 14. We're maybe a third of the way through, but you've got more starts to come from your aces. So yeah, we'll wait and see. Just rounding out that point on Brian Wu. His ERA at home this year in 9 starts, 2.2 with a whip of 0.76 and a strikeout rate of 10 per 9. On the road in 10 starts, an ERA of 6.28 with a whip of 1.43 and a strikeout rate of 7.6. That's probably the most dramatic split in 2026 of any starting pitcher.
That's rough. And we will touch on that series, Mariners Rangers. We were just talking off air before we hit record that's probably the series of the weekend, and an excellent pitching matchup in game 1 of that tomorrow, which we'll get to. Bryce Miller and Mackenzie Gore. Really looking forward to that series, mostly because the Texas Rangers graphics package on their broadcast is gorgeous. Can I just say that? I don't know if I've said that at all on the podcast this year, but it's just on point. Probably the only one that's as good as theirs, I would say, is the Sunday Night Baseball graphics package on NBC and Peacock. I think that one's great. I can find any way to turn a conversation into a nerdy graphics package conversation, but I enjoy watching any excuse to watch the Rangers. Like I said, just because I really enjoy the beauty of what they do, and they probably have one of the best production teams in all of baseball. But yeah, you touched on JT there. Poor JT. JT again coming off a career start, then goes to the 15-day IL. And Paul Skeens is going to have to do it the hard way. Like, he's got to pitch against the Cubs this weekend. He will get a start against Cincinnati likely in his second start. But, I mean, he might face that same issue, kind of what we saw from Burns and Mizorowski, right? Long layoff. The Pirates in a playoff race.
Yeah.
They're probably not necessarily going to want to stretch him. So he may only be looking at, 5 innings, 6, 7 strikeouts. So, I mean, he might only be around that 8, 9 point mark as opposed to, a 15, 16 point performance, which he'd be capable of if they would stretch him out.
Yeah. I mean, it's early and you're leading or tied in the lead, but any early regrets as far as, obviously Miz 1-1 was a no-brainer for you. Michael Harris is doing things so far. Were you close to taking someone else over Cole Young? Was he the last pick? Was he you took Harris on the turn, right? Oh, no, you would have gone, what's that pick? 8 and 9. So it doesn't really matter which one you kind of took. So there would have been a few players on the board. I mean, for me, I was eyeing Trey Turner. It was between Trey Turner and Corbin Carroll, and that was kind of where I was really hung up. And look, Trey Turner's had 8, Corbin's had 6, and Corbin's missed a day or two. So I don't really have any regrets. I just kind of had the disadvantage of picking 4th while all the superstar pitchers, went off the board first. And we shut down. I think we all kind of did a bit of a group think when we shut down Mason Miller. And as sexy a name he is, it's just not the format for him. He's put up 3 points with 3 strikeouts and one completed inning so far, but he's just not going to get the volume, right? So I don't think there's any changes I would have made. Interestingly, Jonathan Aranda was probably that other name on a season level who'd been performing. He's got -3 right now. But yeah, I feel like I drafted the best team I could. It's just going to be over to the guys to get it done, and probably do need an iffy start from both Chase Burns and Mizorowski to have any chance.
Yeah, and look, I was happy that Michael Harris fell to me for my second pick, but I mean, yeah, it was probably Cole Young, Trey Turner, and Aranda were the 3 that I were looking at. I think I was playing Moneyball, right? Like we've got the database that tells us how these guys have been performing over various stretches of time, and Cole Young had come off a hot fortnight and was hot in the month of July until I picked him up. So, and I like the fact that he didn't strike out a lot. He has struck out a couple times this week, but like a lot of guys, if they go over in 4 games, you may be looking at -6, -7 points. So I guess that's the one thing about Cole Young is he doesn't strike out a heap. So if he does have a stretch like this of 4 games where he hasn't gotten a base hit, he's likely still putting the ball in play, so he's not killing you. I didn't want to get into a situation with a Trey Turner, who does have a strikeout in him, probably not as much as Aranda does. But I just didn't want to get in a situation where I was, losing by a point, 2, 3, 4, because I had a guy that was on -3, 4, 5, or 6.
Yeah. Yeah, it was funny. I think the bulk of Trey's points came on that first day while Corbin was sitting with a day-to-day ailment. I was like, oh, man, this is not good. But look, it took a couple of days. Corbin kind of came through for me. And yeah, the interesting one is Brian Bayo, right? Like he's a guy at the start of the year I used to talk about a lot and last year talked about a lot. He just comes out now as like a long relief guy, or sometimes they use an opener for him because I haven't been able to figure him out. There is no chance in the world I could have, I wouldn't have taken him with your pick. I wouldn't have done that to you. But he's got 7. He's been the second best player so far. And I think the opportunity to come out maybe a little bit more regularly because he's not a starting pitcher can sometimes work. We've seen Cal Quantrill do it. A few of those middle relief guys can sometimes be not the worst 3rd round pick in Destiny draft, but that's usually in a draft where we're not talking about names like Chase Burns and Jacob Mizorowski.
Yeah, and I mean, you touched on it there with Mason Miller as well. Like, I mean, I want to say the first day of the round came out and got a save in the 9th inning, struck out the side, and you're sitting there going, oh, okay, pretty easy 3 points. If he does that 7 times in the fortnight, you're happy, but he hasn't pitched since. That's the problem with a closer and B, a closer who's on the San Diego Padres, because they've got to be in a position to allow him to go on the mound. And, I would still think that San Diego probably would want to have as many opportunities as possible to showcase Mason Miller. I mean, everybody knows what he can do, but as the trade deadline approaches, I still think that he's a guy that they're going to field a lot of conversations about, and we'll dive into the trade deadline stuff a little bit more on Tuesday whenever Eric's back with us. I didn't mention Eric's not here. Sorry. Should have done that at the top of the show. But imagine he had been and I just hadn't introduced him. It was just like, let's just bring in Eric now.
Anyway, that's enough Destiny draft. How are you doing, Eric?
God, that would have been funny. We need to do that to him at some point. He's not here. We can plan things without him because he's never going to listen to this. I do want to ask you about Mason Miller though, because I think we touched on it. Maybe it was last week when somebody within the Padres organization, I think it was an unnamed source, which we all love unnamed sources, said that they would be potentially open to moving him, but a team might have to consider taking on Xander Bogaerts because it's clear that that contract just isn't working. I mean, I think he has 4 more years at $32 million or something. And it's not to say that he can't turn it around because he's been a great player at some point in his career. But to me, that just like, unless you are a team that is going to win a World Series this year with Mason Miller, because you would get 1 more year of team control, I think. I think he would have 1 more arbitration year after this year. So you could get 2 years of team control. Well, the end of this year and then next year. But unless you are a team that is just missing an elite arm at the end of a game, I don't see any reason why you would purposely take on Xander Bogaerts $32 million a year just to have the most elite closer in baseball.
I think if that's a real position, I think what that does is it eliminates his realistic destination to one team, right? Like I'm thinking pinstripes. What that bullpen looks like for the Yankees, and the Yankees, I already spoke about. Max Fried came back yesterday, looked really good. Rodon's not far away. Stanton, maybe Judge. You've got Mason Miller there. It's a bullpen that's already been solid, but Mason Miller completely changes that. And to be honest, I'm probably starting Xander Bogaerts over Anthony Volpe. Volpe just seems to have these moments, in big moments, where the glove develops a hole or he makes some kind of base running mistake, and it's only really injury that's opened up this extra opportunity for Volpe. After they sent him down, it kind of felt like, well, he's most likely next going to be seen in the majors for a team other than the Yankees. The Yankees obviously don't care about luxury tax. They're going to spend big, and they're second favorite right now to win the World Series. So I think when you factor all of that in, potentially Bogarts becoming the starting shortstop, with monopoly money isn't necessarily the deterrent to the Yankees that it would be for a lot of other teams.
I guess the one thing, because I mean, yes, the Yankees would have the money to do it. Are the Padres happy enough just using Mason Miller as a piece to get rid of Bogarts, or are they going to want something in return? You think they're not going to let a guy like Mason Miller walk without getting something in return. So it's about, yeah, you're going to take on this contract, but also we're going to get something from you. I mean, George Lombard Jr. is their top prospect. I mean, son of a former big leaguer. His younger brother just got drafted in the first round. He's a shortstop. Many Yankees fans will tell you that he probably would be a September call-up this year. That's probably a guy potentially that San Diego would be looking at. Again, I don't know that for fact. But then they've got another shortstop in rookie ball who they just drafted last year in Dax Kilby, who a lot of people think is one of the best high school shortstops that has gone through the draft system in ages. I mean, he's a top 100 prospect, and he's 18 years of age. So, I mean, that might be a guy that you have to give up who could be a potential 15-year big leaguer down the line just to be able to get Mason Miller. So it would, I mean, and that's why this time of year is so interesting, because we don't really know the conversations that are happening. It would be good to get our good friend of the show, JP Morosi, on, but he's very busy this time of year, hot stove and all that sort of stuff. But that's what makes this time of year so interesting, because it's like, is a team just willing to make that deal to offload a bad contract, or are they going to dig their heels in and say, no, we want something of legitimacy in return? Because then that's where the conversation for the Yankees becomes, what is this about, right? Are we trying to win now and we'll just worry about restacking the farm later? I guess when you're the Yankees, it makes that conversation a bit easier because you can just go out and buy. But typically, a team's not going to give away 2 top 50 prospects you wouldn't have thought for a year and a half of a closer.
I feel like the way the Padres usually operate is they keep the window open forever, and they don't trade players away for someone who might not be a factor for 4 or 5 years. I think an interesting name to watch in this hypothetical would be Jason Dominguez, right? Like he's still only 23. He was the highest rated prospect for a while there, and there was a lot of hype for him. Hasn't quite panned out yet. He's had some injuries that's kind of like set him back a little bit, but he's an outfielder. The Padres don't need more shortstops. Like you can move Fernando Tatis back to shortstop in a heartbeat and have Jason Dominguez in your outfield. And taking a 23-year-old kind of signals to the fan base, look, this isn't the year, but we're not also saying come back in 3 or 4 years when these kids start to show something, because I mean, the Padres' entire rotation just about is on the IL, but these guys are
Yeah.
going to be back next year. So to copy a term that's used all the time in the D-backs world is we're not rebuilding, we're retooling, right?
Mm. Yeah, when I just looked it up, I think I must have been thinking about Tarek Skubal because obviously he's off contract at the end of the year. But Mason Miller actually still has 3 more years of team control after this year. So his earliest that he could elect free agency is 2030. So he's just going to garner a lot of money in arbitration. But again, if you're a team like the Yankees, you can handle that. And again, maybe that's part of the conversation for the Padres. If they go, if we're not going to be a legitimate title contender in the next couple of years, or if we think we are, what are we willing to pay for a closer? Because, I mean, we saw Tarek Skubal, what did he get, $32 million in arbitration last year before he even went to free agency, which he will do this year, you would think, depending on what happens with him at the trade deadline. What's a guy like Mason Miller going to get in his first year of arbitration next year? I mean, he's a closer. It's a different story, but I mean, you're probably looking somewhere in the $15 to $18 million range. So that's something else to consider when you're the Padres. You're getting him at $4 million this year, but next year, that's probably going to be 3 or 4x. So again, he's never going to have more value than what he does now, which again is what makes, I think, this time of year in this particular instance so compelling.
The one really interesting piece of the Mason Miller thing is when the Padres traded for him and they gave up the number one prospect in baseball to do it, there were leaks almost immediately that their plan was to turn him into a starter. Now, that obviously hasn't happened, but I wonder if the right team goes into that with that level of thinking. Like I don't know. We've seen a lot of guys over the last couple of years try to go from that relief pitcher to starting pitcher role with varying degrees of success. The Braves have tried it with a couple of guys like Reynaldo Lopez. I don't know necessarily whether that would be the right move, but you do wonder if you're going to take on that 3 years, then you get him at arbitration level at, a relief pitcher. You were sort of throwing that 15 number around. If he was as good a starting pitcher as he is a relief pitcher, he'd be getting Tarek Skubal's number.
Yeah.
Is that the kind of way to moneyball that? I mean, there's one team I think of that would try that, right? It's the Rays, even though it's probably a bit rich for them, even paying a relief pitcher $15 million to begin with. They always seem to have the farm. They always seem to have the young guys. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they made a move like that and said, hey, next year he's our opening day starter. And everyone goes, why didn't we think to try that?
But anyways, look, it's a fun discussion, and I often enjoy having these conversations this time of year because 5% of it comes to fruition. But we will do a deeper dive into the trade deadline stuff. Hopefully there's some moves maybe potentially made over the weekend, but we'll do a deeper dive on that on Tuesday. Look, before we get to Spoon's tips, I did just want to update the listeners on the Women's World Cup. I know Eric's been doing a lot of good work on social media, a lot of collaborative posts with Team Australia and at the WBSC, trying to keep folks who are just learning about the Women's Baseball World Cup in tune with what's going on. The day 2 results were a little bit wacky. Australia beat Hong Kong, China 21-0. Canada beat Korea 15-2. And the United States topped Mexico 24-5. So there were some lopsided results, you can say, on day 2 of the Women's World Cup. But Australia is faring well. They're 2-0. They, Canada, and the USA are all 2-0. Again, you've got to finish in the top 3 in this qualifier to get into the World Cup final next year. But the big task for Australia will come tomorrow. It'll be a friendly viewing time here in Australia. It's 7 o'clock Eastern time in the U.S. tomorrow. So I believe that's sort of around 9 a.m. our time here in Sydney, around 9 or 10 a.m., where Australia will take on the United States. So they will get they'll get a clear look at where they are at tomorrow, Spoon. I don't think, and maybe this is possible, but I don't think Australia is going to be scoring 21 runs against the United States tomorrow.
3 touchdowns.
24-21 would be an interesting scoreline. That's what those two teams scored today. And yeah, you're right. That does sound like an American football scoreline. But again, you can head to baseball.com.au to read some of Eric's coverage on Team Australia, and WBSC.org has all of the coverage. Let's get into the tips. Spoon's going to try and win us some money. I believe both of the pod plays on Wednesday got up, didn't they, Spoon?
Yeah, the best of the day at $1.95, the best value at $3.30, and then the top up on that at $6.50. So it was a nice one for those who listened to the Hump Day episode.
Man's is hot. Well, look, we touched on this series a little bit earlier, and I went on a rant about beautiful graphics package. But why don't we start there in Texas? Rangers-Mariners gets us started. What a pitching matchup that is. Bryce Miller, Mackenzie Gore, the matchup tomorrow. What do you like in that one?
Yeah, I really like this for both guys tomorrow. Seattle are now 22nd in baseball on strikeout rate. Texas are 18th. So they're both kind of down there. A lot of swing and miss guys. Look, both guys' line is sitting right around the 6-ish mark. I think we're going to see really good pitching in this series all weekend. Obviously Gore and Miller tomorrow, but then it's Wu and Evaldi the day after, closed by Logan Gilbert versus Jacob deGrom, which is just mouth-watering stuff if you like fastballs and strikeouts as much as I do. I think we're going to see the starting pitching from both sides play to the level of their opponent. It's going to have all the feeling of a playoff series. The division lead is on the line here. These games are basically worth 2. And if either team was able to sweep this series, they're going to have a pretty comfortable lead as far as the division goes. So I'm going to make this one the best value, and I'm going to take Gore and Miller to both get 7 strikeouts, which is paying $5.10. And if you look at their recent starts, so Mackenzie Gore's last 5 starts, he's gone 5, 7, 7, 4, 7. 7's right around the mark for him. Bryce Miller's gone 7, 11, 8, 3, and 6. And I'll disclaim this a little bit that when the combined strikeout markets come out tomorrow, I'm thinking it's probably going to be 13 for $2.10 combined. I want to be on that as well as a saver, because obviously both guys getting to 7. We're getting the price we are at 5.10 because we need to see a brilliant start from either. But if we can get 13 combined strikeouts at $2.10, that's where my saver will be, because if one guy hits that 8, 9, 10, which they can easily do, we don't need much from the other, even if they have a shorter outing. So best value in, I think, the best series of the weekend coming up tomorrow.
Such a beautifully friendly viewing time as well. 10 a.m. East Coast time on a Saturday morning. I'll be putting a pot of chili in the slow cooker, cutting up some onions and some jalapenos. And what else would you rather be doing besides watching Bryce Miller and Mackenzie Gore? But an hour before that, it's Trey Day. Trey is Savage on the mound for the Blue Jays against the Red Sox, and that is where we go for your next best.
Yeah, look, and it wouldn't be fair to jump onto this series without giving chocolate to the Boston Red Sox. They had their 15-game win streak snap yesterday in the second game of a doubleheader against the Orioles, but 15 in a row, man. Like, you and I talk every day about our teams and how frustrating it is when they kind of yo-yo around 500. A 15-game win streak for either of our teams just completely changes the mood forever, right? Like the Red Sox went from doom and gloom and definite sellers to I don't know what they do now. I'm not even sure it's a good thing because...
Well, I saw a report today that like Aroldis Chapman to the White Sox was all but done. 15
That's
games
bizarre.
ago.
Yeah, right.
And
well,
because they've turned the season...
was the
Well, but just because they've turned the season around, it's like, well, we can't trade Chapman now. So it's crazy to think about that. If one domino falls 2 weeks ago, it could change the whole trajectory of the Red Sox for the next couple of seasons. You know what I mean? So it is crazy what like 2 weeks can do in a sport that's all about longevity.
Yeah, and where they say not all wins are equal, it's kind of true because you could start the season with 15 wins. No one cares if you're, below 500 at the deadline, and you could play in those dog days of September and win 15 games when no one really cares. But to win 15 in a row, 10 days before the trade deadline like they have, and categorically go from sellers to buyers. I mean, the atmosphere was awesome. I was watching a few of those games at Fenway. I think Contreras had a massive game-tying shot to keep the streak alive a few games ago. There were some double headers in there. There were some rain delays. Like it had all the makings of falling apart a lot sooner than it did. So 15 in a row. Well done, Boston. The vibes are very good right now. All of that said, I'm going to be going against them tomorrow.
I had a feeling that was coming.
Yeah, look, they did lose, and the Jays are awful right now. We can say that because Eric's not here. If he was here, he'd be saying it. I wouldn't need to. I think that the wrong team is favorite here. I can't believe it's $1.80 Boston to $2 Blue Jays, but I'm not going to touch that just because of how bad the vibes are. And of all the logic I apply to all of the bets on this show, the vibes indicator is comfortably the most important. What I do think is crazy is a 5.5 strikeout line for Trey Savage, who's coming off, I think, his best start of the season. He struck out 9 White Sox, and he had 19 swinging strikes. That is a lot of swing and miss. And if you look at, the numbers he was posting before then, he was sort of around the 10 mark. His highest swinging strikes number this year was that 19 start. Before that, he was kind of 17, 16. He went 95 pitches, which was his second highest count for the year. Like, all things are pointing towards something clicking for Trey. I also thought something that was really interesting with him. His ERA at home is 4.2 with an 8.0 K rate. On the road, interestingly, his ERA is a really impressive 3.25, and his strikeout rate jumps to 9.5, so above 1 per inning. All things to me point to 6 or more strikeouts tomorrow for Trey. I think that's the best bet of the day. Boston, despite this 15-game win streak, are 15th in baseball for swing and miss and strikeout numbers. They will chase, and Trey just has the stuff. He's been off for a little bit. Kind of haven't spoken about him for a little bit because he was one of those guys I wanted to see him do it before I jumped back on. Now I've seen him do it, and I want to jump back on.
I like it. I mean, it's another fun game to have a look at. There's some fun series and some meaningful series this weekend. We were talking about it there before, and this is a question without notice, but I do want to get your opinion on this. It's Sunday our time, Saturday in the U.S., but Paul Skeens getting that start at home against the Cubs. It'll be interesting to see what his strikeout line is for reasons that we've touched on with Mizorowski and Chase Burns, right? Because those teams seem reluctant to stretch those guys. Do you think it could be a similar situation for Pittsburgh? And like, is that a bet that you would potentially be willing to have looking at unders for Paul Skeens start this weekend?
If they give me 6.5, I mean, if they give me 7.5, it's comfortably an underplay, I think, for reasons you just mentioned. He had 8 strikeouts in his last start, but he needed 100 pitches to do it. Before then, things have kind of been shaky. I mean, he hadn't cleared that 7.5 line in a long time. And his velocity's down this year. You know, we're saying he's having a bad year. He's got a 3.4 ERA, but by the standard he set in his first 2 seasons, things just don't quite look as comfortable. The Cubs are 12th in baseball for strikeout percentage. You know, they do swing and miss a bit, but they also are one of those teams that we saw them do it to Framber Valdez earlier in the week. They can put 3, 4, 5 runs on you in an inning and just end your night. It seems like the Cubs are a team that score a lot of their runs in bunches. They don't exactly chip away at you. And if Skeens runs into one of those in the first 5 frames, I think he's going to have a short outing. And that's not even factoring in, you know, the point you made about being careful with a young arm after, you know, a couple of weeks off after the break. So, yeah, look, 7.5, if that's there at even money, give me the under. But I'll even be looking at 6.5 as a potential under. Because I think that a lot needs to go right, and this is a huge series for the Pirates. And, you know, both of us are probably hoping the Pirates get swept, given where they're sitting in the wild card race right now. And I'm hoping PCA hits 7 home runs this weekend as well. So yeah, 7.5 definite under, 6.5. I'd probably want a 220 in front of it to take it. All of that depends how tight-lipped the org are about the pitch count, because we spoke this week. I tipped on Tuesday, Mizorowski under 8.5, and that was mainly around 8.5 is a lot. I've taken that play 3 or 4 times this year, and I think I've gone 3 or 4-0 with it officially. There was one time I backed him for unders in a 2 a.m. game, went to bed and woke up and he had a dozen of them. And then you kind of mentioned, they said on the broadcast he was going to be capped at the pitch count he was, which was like 65. I mean, if that was public knowledge, Vegas was not putting an 8.5 out there, right?
Yeah.
So if the Pirates come out and say something like that with Skeens, we may not get a line at all, because often when there's uncertainty around pitch counts like that, they'll let you bet the alternate totals up, but there won't be an over-under, at least with Bet365 and some of the major corporates. If that's a bit more tight-lipped and you're just backing it on, you know, a pattern around the league right now, especially with young arms, there's definite value there, because I liked the under 8.5 of Miz. Like I said, after he struck out 5 Mets in 2 innings, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake. And then, as they say, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and he was on a short pitch count.
Yeah, well, they were talking about it early in that broadcast, so I thought you were safe. But yeah, after that first inning, it looked like he potentially could strike out 8 in 4 innings the way he was going. And just one other that I want to touch on for Sunday here in Australia. Good grief, there's some good pitching matchups. Yamamoto and McLean, Dodgers, Mets. But your man, Yuri Perez, getting the start at home against the Padres. I think that'll definitely be one that we'll keep an eye out on at Spoon Does Baseball to see what your play will be for Perez. A Padres team that's sort of middle of the road in terms of strikeouts, but a team on their day does have a lot of swing and miss in them. So I imagine there'll probably be an Yuri play of some sort on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, again, if they give me 5.5 for Ayuri, which they've done a lot this year, I'm happy to take it, and I'm happy to take the 8+ that usually goes around at $4.50 or $5, because Yuri Perez doesn't often limp to 6. He kind of, smashes past it with 7 or 8, or he just has one of those starts where his fastball isn't moving and it's effectively a glorified batting practice pitch and he gets taken yard. But look, since he's come back, he's been superb, and I'm super excited to watch that one.
And obviously keeping an eye on those pitching futures for Yuri Perez. He's at, 46 strikeouts to get to the 150. You had a couple of top-ups for him. So we'd like to see him continue to tick along. He's at 104 Ks. We need him to get to 150, 170, and ultimately 190 for Spoon's future plays. So obviously we'll be keeping an eye on the Marlins-Padres game.
Yeah, and if we're
on
previewing
Sunday.
the weekend in line with season future plays, we need one more Yordan Alvarez home run for 35, which is crazy to think.
Insane.
We're not even at the end of July, and a $2.60 bet is one home run away, and he's into $1.40 now for MVP. Something happened to Bobby Witt Jr. I think he's gone back on the IL. He's blown out to 34, so it's kind of him or Junior Caminero now for AL MVP. But yeah, I mean, I'm just going to keep eating if Yordan can keep mashing, and so far he's doing that.
Well, and like it's getting to that point in the season where a lot of these better bets that you've had are going to start to come in. I mean, obviously, knock on wood, Cam Schlittler just 30 strikeouts from getting you to that total. Show Imanaga 31 strikeouts away from 40. Chase Burns is just 36 away from that total of 160. So a lot of these that we spoke about sort of a couple weeks ago during the All-Star break, knock on wood, if these guys continue to tick along, a lot of these bets will start to get paid out with plenty of room to spare.
James Wood
I think there's still
needs
10
2
weeks
home runs.
I think there's still 10 weeks of baseball left. So I mean, you've got plenty of time to get some of these up.
Yeah, look, James Wood needs 2 home runs for 30, and that was paying $3. He can wait. I don't need him to get that this weekend because the Nationals are going to score 0 runs and get perfect gamed 3 times in a row. Sometime early next week would be nice, James, if you could tick that one over for me.
Yeah, just take the weekend off against the Diamondbacks and come on a tear next week. Well, again, you can head to baseballexpats.com, click on Destiny Draft to follow along. It'll be interesting to see how that scoreboard sort of ticks over during the weekend, and we will be back on Tuesday, back to regularly scheduled programming. Hopefully, Eric doesn't have any more card trouble. The one thing we didn't touch on is, Eric, if you weren't with us on, I don't know, all the days are running together, Wednesday, Eric sort of gave us the trauma that was caused by his Miss an X trail. And they decided to send him a survey today, which he sent to Spoon and I, and he said he's either going to write a long War and Peace, or he's just going to send Vladdy's day-to-day statistics, which I think may confuse them, but it'll be interesting to see what Eric does when he goes back to that Nissan dealership. But Eric will be back with us on Tuesday for regularly scheduled programming, and I promise you we will do a deep dive on the trade deadline. But until then, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your baseball. Bye, everybody.